Alright guys, this is a long playing review for Chuckie Egg on the Amstrad CPC, released by A&F Software in 1985 and later re-released by Pick and Choose, a company I can find next to nothing about, but they're likely a rebrand or a new company after A&F got into financial difficulties going bust around 1986, and both companies were based in and around Manchester. But anyway, Chuckie Egg first appeared on the ZX Spectrum and BBC Micro in 1983. And before we get into the game, the Amstrad version has no credits given anywhere, but I believe it was done by a guy called Doug Anderson, and we can even find his name hidden in the code if we look with the emulator's debug tools, and there it is in two places in fact. And Doug went on to do UN Squadron and Alien Storm on the CPC. So anyway, let's kick things off with the actual long play, and here's the loading screen, just a load of text, but you're not missing much there as it disappears rather quickly because of the fast disk load we've got going. Redefine your keys if you want to use joystick, and a pretty bare bones sort of title screen and presentation, no music here or any bells and whistles. It's just a simple game and straight into the action. As for how many players, but you would take it in turns if there's more than one player. So off we go. You control Henhouse Harry here, running around his farm collecting 12 eggs per level. You need to avoid the blue ostriches. Yes, they are ostriches apparently. And later on, the crazy duck, which you can see there in the cage in the top left, will escape and will flap around chasing after you, and that's quite a iconic moment actually in gaming history, not just in the game itself. Fondly remembered by many. And there you go, collect all the eggs and the level is complete. Pretty simple stuff. So here we are going to be playing up to level 25, which is basically 3 loops of the game. Now on the second loop you get chased by the big mother duck, or the crazy duck, as the manual calls it. Then on the third loop you basically have the ostrich chicks back again, as we're seeing here, but you also have the crazy duck chasing you around as well. So loop 4 at level 25 is basically the same as loop 3, but with just more ostriches. Now apparently the pattern continues looping till about level 40, but adding in more ostriches, I'm not quite sure. But I think from level 48 the level timer starts decreasing. So the starting timer there gets less and less. But basically, guys, this is a high score attack game with no ending. But I think 3 loops is enough to sort of give you the full long play treatment here. If anybody wants to see me go beyond level 25 in a part 2 of this, you let me know in the comments below. And if enough people request it, maybe I will do a part 2 of this game and video. And maybe we'll see if we can get to like level 48 or something. But I think 3 loops is probably enough here. So anyway, yeah. This is one of the greatest 8-bit platforming games of all time. I absolutely love this. I wish I'd done a video sooner on it, but there was already lots of videos around YouTube. Especially in the early days of YouTube and retro gamers getting to grips with YouTube and all that kind of stuff. YouTube was pretty much flooded with Chuckie Egg videos. It is a very, very popular game. Remakes of the game and mods of it are still being made to this day, and I recommend you go and check them out. There's even been remakes and stuff for Android apps and all that kind of stuff. So Chuckie Egg still lives on, and man, I still love playing this game, as do many people. I literally saw last week before recording this video at least 2, maybe 3 other people on Twitch or YouTube actually playing some Chuckie Egg. Wow. And it was like, wow, what timing? Because I was like already practicing the game for the Longplay video. So there you go. Chuckie Egg is an absolute classic. It's got very, very basic, simple graphics. It's got barely any sound. There is a jingle of music when you lose a life. And you'll hear that at the end of the video. You're not missing much not hearing this, because obviously I'm trying to do this without losing a life. And that's your lot. It's a very, very simple platform game. Just collect all the items on the level and move on. But this is very different to, say, something like another classic platforming game like Manic Miner from the same era. This is fast-paced, fun action where you're not thinking too much about how you attack a level as much as Manic Miner. Manic Miner feels perhaps a little bit more puzzly, because you've really got to go a certain specific route on a lot of levels on Manic Miner, and Manic Miner requires sort of pixel perfect precision jumps. Chuckie Egg doesn't require any of that. You can just bomb around the level as you feel like. But obviously there's a bit of strategy involved because of the randomly moving ostriches, although they kind of got a set pattern, but you could pretty much judge when they come up or down a ladder if they're going to move left or right if you've been watching them and observing. But you're not really going to be doing that. You've got a time limit ticking down, and the game invites you to run around and bounce around like a mad thing and just have fun with it. And I love it. It's platforming at its purest and simplest, and just expertly pulled off. And by a guy who'd never really programmed a platforming game before. So the original Chuckie Egg version was actually designed and coded by a young Nigel Alderton, who was still at school at the time. And Amstrad fans will be familiar with him from his coding work on the Ghosts and Goblins conversion, which was pretty decent. And I like it. Now, so the story goes, he used to pop it into his local newsagent to play the latest arcade games there. His favourite was Space Panic, which is a big influence here, and probably the biggest influence. But also Donkey Kong, which gave Chuckie Egg its first name of Eggy Kong, believe it or not. Yes, Eggy Kong, before A&F renamed it. Nigel was working a Saturday job in the A&F shop, which served as both a computer game store and a programming house, and there were several programmers housed in the back making games for A&F to start distributing. And now, one day, young Nigel showed his work on the specky Eggy Kong game to the other coders there, and their jaws basically hit the floor. They loved it. And basically, work continued with Doug Anderson. We talked about him earlier, working on the famous BBC Micro version, which would sort of unofficially become the BBC's killer app and game for the system. You ask any BBC owner what their top 3 games are on the BBC, and you'd be pretty sure that Chuckie Egg would be in there. So yes, basically Nigel was doing continuing work on the ZX Spectrum version, whilst Doug worked on the BBC version. More on Doug and the BBC version later, because it's highly relevant to the Amstrad version we're playing here. Now, Chuckie Egg and all its versions would go on to sell over 1 million copies, and it also put A&F on the map, although they would never reach its heights again, even with a poorly received Chuckie Egg sequel, which was also named Chuckie Egg. But Nigel or Doug didn't work on this, having already left to work at Ocean on Kong Strikes Back. And Nigel had been working on designs for his own sequel to Chuckie Egg called Chuckie Apple, which was more like a Mr. Do clone. Oh my god, the mother duck! It's unleashed from the cage and is now attacking us. So now, guys, we are on the second loop, which is level 9, and is basically level 1 again, but without any of the ostriches. But now the crazy duck has escaped her or his cage and is chasing after us. And as you can see, the duck has some kind of inertia on it, and will sort of bounce and pull around us. and is constantly homing in on us. But with once you get used to the movement and stuff, you can work out that the duck is actually fairly easy to avoid. Certainly on these earlier levels, which we're looping through again. And there you go. But Nigel has said that basically he didn't want to do a game like Manic Miner, where it was more about puzzle solving and specific timings. He wanted a fast-paced action platformer that more relied on dexterity. And yeah, that pretty much confirms what I was thinking and said earlier in the video here. What else to mention quickly? The character of Henhouse Harry wasn't named by Nigel or Doug, but by a marketing guy at A&F who did the back of the boxes. So he was an unnamed character during development, and by the time the game was finished as well. So there's no real backstory in the manual, and frankly, there doesn't need to be. It's a very, very simple platformer, but it's absolutely brilliant. But yes, as you saw in the early levels, those are indeed blue ostriches. People think they're like little baby ducks or chicks before they turn into hens or whatever. No, Nigel has confirmed himself that they are blue ostriches. Ostriches, sorry. Difficult for me to pronounce for some reason. So there's no actual hens or chickens in this game, although apparently you are in a farmyard. And yes, just to confirm again, the manual does indeed call the duck chasing us here the crazy duck. And there you go. At least in the Amstrad manual. I'm not sure if the other manuals of the other versions... Oh, I nearly got killed there. I'm not sure if any of the other versions manuals call the duck anything different, but there you go. Now, I think as we've gathered from what I've said so far, Nigel didn't do the Amstrad version. He believes, though, that a guy called Mike Webb wrote most of the other conversions. And he might be right here, with him possibly doing the Amstrad version. I mean, Mike was at A&F with Nigel, but also moved to Ocean with Nigel too at the same time, with Nigel doing Kong Strikes Back on the Specky and Mike doing the CPC version. However, Mike did not do the BBC Micro version of Chuckie Egg, which is near enough identical to the Amstrad CPC version. That was Doug Anderson. So I would say and guess that it's Doug here on programming duties, not Mike. And basically the BBC and the CPC versions are also the only ones not to have credits for the programmers on the title screens. Mike Webb's versions, for example, all had his name on it. So I'm going with Doug here. And I even, as mentioned earlier, when I went through the code in the Win8 debugger and found the name Doug in at least 2 places. But there were no hits for Nigel or Mike in the code, though. Oh, that was close. Quite generous collision detection here, actually. I think they've got it. I think, shall we say Nigel or shall we say Doug, have got it spot on here. The only thing I'm perhaps not a fan of in the game are the lifts and jumping off them. Or indeed, that you, more specifically, that you can't control the descent of Henhouse Harry and push him in a direction when he falls off the edge of a platform. I think that is the only improvement I would make in the game. As you can see, he just drops straight down like a stone, which is probably more accurate to real life. But Nigel was never going for accuracy in real life here. For example, Henhouse Harry, as you saw there, can drop from huge heights and not die. And I like that. I hate platform games that basically kill you if you drop from a too high a height. I'm not after realism in platform games. Programmers and coders. We don't need to die when we drop down from stupid heights. Let's just keep it fun and fast-paced and exciting and remove the frustration. The frustration does come from, at times, I think it more happened on the lifts than anything else. You're right on the edge of the lift, and you've just pushed a pixel too far, and you fall to your doom. And it's an instant loss of life, because where the lifts are, of course, it's basically empty space at the bottom of the screen, so you're guaranteed to lose a life there. If you could control your descent a bit more, that would be much nicer. And that's my only real criticism, really. I mean, we can talk about, or maybe the graphics can be improved, or maybe they can add more features and stuff like that. But at some point, you have to, say, I'm done with the game as a coder, and declare it done and move on. I mean, this game is already such good fun as it is. I don't think it really needs much improvement unless you're talking about a sequel. But unfortunately, on the sequel, Chuckie Egg, or Chuckie Egg 2, they turned it into kind of a Jet Set Willy meets Dizzy kind of clone, where you're exploring like a whole world, and you're collecting objects to use at certain places. Like, I remember there's a giant dog you need to get past outside a kennel, and you need to go and collect the bone and drop the bone near the dog, and the dog will let you go by him and stuff like that. That's not Chuckie Egg, and it should be a Chuckie Egg sequel. I mean, there are fans of the sequel out there, and people do really like that game, but it's kind of disappointing after such a good game as this one. And really, guys, if you're looking at this and wondering, like, this looks really basic and naff, and the graphics are really crude, maybe, and there's no music, the sound effects are a bit lacking, and all that kind of stuff. What is Zypho talking about? You clearly haven't probably played this game before. You need to pick up a joystick and load it up ASAP, or fire it up in an emulator and just give it a play for a few minutes, and I guarantee you'll love it. I don't know anyone out there that hates Chuckie Egg, and I'd love to know if there are in the comments. Let me know if you do. If you're one of those rare people that doesn't like Chuckie Egg, let me know your reasons why, and I'll be interested to know. But I'll get on to more of my thoughts on the game shortly. But I think we're going to talk about the other versions of the game now, and there are a lot of versions of Chuckie Egg out there. So let's start with the ZX Spectrum version, the original one, from Nigel Alderton. Actually, when you load it up, it starts with a nice jingle of the Birdie song, and all that. Yeah, right. And it's actually generally better presented with some nice sort of psychedelic effects between levels. Oh, actually, let's stop there, because we've now moved on to the third loop. So we're now actually, this is like the first level again, but now we have the ostriches back, and we have the crazy duck chasing us at the same time. So we're going to do this loop, and then I'm done with the long play, basically. So there we go. This is the third loop, and the last set of levels we're doing, up to level 25. Yes, we'll talk about the Specky version. Nice psychedelic effects between the levels. Whilst the level layouts look mostly the same, the feel of the game is a little bit different. Harry jumps in a different arc and falls slower. So if you're used to the CPC and the BBC versions, this may take some getting used to, but actually it makes the game a little bit easier, in my opinion. I gave it a play earlier, and I found it just actually makes it a tad easier. For example, if you jump off a ledge, you don't travel down horizontally as much, making it easier to do dangerous jumps onto moving lifts. However, the duck in the cage can still kill you if you jump into it, and apparently there are some minor bugs in the Specky version. But it is the original, and it is the classic one. And I will come on to perhaps which is the best one in a bit, because we need to talk about the BBC Micro version. And wow, what can I say here about the BBC Micro version? The BBC one is pretty much identical to the Amstrad CPC version. There are some very slight differences, mostly in that the brightness of the colours used, but we're really nitpicking, and also how the Def Jingle music sounds. And but it's the same music. But that's it. I honestly can't say if one version is better than the other. They play at the same speed. They feel identical with the controls and the responsiveness of them, and exactly. Harry moves exactly the same. The games are identical. If anyone can spot any differences, please let me know in the comments. So there you go. The BBC Micro was the original one alongside the Specky one, and it's identical to the Amstrad one. The Commodore 64, let's move on to that quickly. Yeah, this one actually has skill levels, 6 skill levels, which changes the speed it plays at. So crank up the difficulty and it plays quite a bit faster than the CPC, Specky and BBC. It also has a proper sprite for Harry that isn't just one colour. Levels seem to be the same, but they seem to be wider in proportion. But colour wise, it looks a lot duller. The Crazy Duck sprite is also a lot smaller. But this version, the Commodore 64 version, doesn't seem to grab me as much as the Specky, CPC and BBC. But it's still a great version of the game, and it's definitely worth checking out. I'm really kind of nitpicking there. So this also appeared on the Dragon 32, bless it, and it's actually a very decent port for quite an underpowered hardware. It does have quite flickery sprites though, and a rather garish bright green background, which loses its marks, but a very good effort and one to own if you have a Dragon. This also appeared on the Atari 8-bit, and the graphics are quite a bit different here. Harry has a new look. Plus the platforms and lifts take on a kind of a 3D look. It's smooth, but plays a little slower than the Beeb, CPC and Specky. But it's very, very decent version. This also arrived on the MSX. And interesting. And the most colourful version so far of the game, plays at a decent speed with no flicker. For once, a good port of a UK game to the MSX. And it's probably closest to the BBC and CPC versions. The Tatton Einstein, believe it or not, if you've heard of that computer, had a version, and this seems almost identical to the MSX version. So there you go. Now, this also appeared on the 16-bits. The Atari ST had a version, and it takes its cues from the 8-bit Atari one, and the platforms have a 3D look to them. And generally, of course, it's a lot more colourful with actual backgrounds of the farm. But the most noticeable change is in the main Harry sprite, who seems to have mutated into an actual Dizzy-like egg with weird yellow legs and a red baseball cap. Ugh. And of course, when you die, you splat into an icky, yolky mess. I mean, it seems to play like the original, but I don't like how he sort of bounces along when he runs. It's off-putting timing your jumps, and that messes up the core gameplay. But there doesn't seem to be much added for a 16-bit machine to make it worthwhile here. And it also appeared on the Amiga, and as expected, it's the same as the ST, but with better sound and music. So basically, guys, stick to the 8-bit versions. But also, guys, there are even versions in Java and Android, but released by Elite, who have been notorious in recent years for sucking up old gaming IP to exploit. I wonder if Nigel saw any money from this. Who knows? Anyway, you use tilt controls on the Android version, and it appears it's no longer available on the Play Store, sadly. Instead, there's another Chuckie Egg game called Chuckie Egg 2017 HD, but from a different team, called Downside Up Games, and costs $1.99 currently in the Play Store, but I've not bothered with it. There you go. There are lots of remakes of the game, lots of mods of the game out there for various different platforms, so I just don't have the time to go to research them and go into them, but they do exist out there on plenty of websites. Right, let's go on to the review. So in magazines at the time, and we always look for the Amstrad Action magazine review because that was the main Amstrad magazine at the time. And it was reviewed in Amstrad Action's very first issue in October of 1985. They liked it, but didn't love it, giving it 78% overall, marking it down for its simple graphics and sound, and then the lack of variety. And I think that's harsh, but it was their first issue, and they were blasting through hundreds of game reviews in that issue. so maybe fatigue crept in with the reviewers at the time, who knows. But as for my review, guys, I mean, okay, let's get to it. And let's just say it, graphics and sound aren't everything. Gameplay should always be king. And I have to admit that I've often overlooked a game's shortcomings in previous reviews in the past, because it had really nice looking graphics and music and presentation. And, you know, I may have even put far too much importance in the past on games having great graphics and presentations and stuff like that. But here, with Chuckie Egg, it boils down to pure, simple gameplay. As we go through the final level of this long play here, this is quite possibly the best and most addictive platformer on the Amstrad, or indeed pretty much any 8-bit home computer. There is nothing like the feeling, and I mean nothing like the feeling, of bouncing around the levels of Chuckie Egg with such ease, responsiveness and dexterity. You don't have to be a gaming god to play this as well. And to do well in Chuckie Egg, just take your time and work methodically. You can see I've done that in a few levels here on this long play. Alternatively, you can just speed through the levels like an absolute god, and go for the high scores with, or higher scores, by doing the levels a lot quicker and getting the time bonus. And basically, guys, Chuckie Egg suits all gamers of all skill levels, and it is platforming perfection, and it is excellent. My first egg pun, and only egg pun, I promise. So, guys, as a final review score, I'm going to give this game a whopping 9 out of 10. And I think with a few minor adjustments to, for example, being able to control your fall and descent by pushing left or right, and Harry would move left or right as he falls, I think I would give this like easily a 9.5 out of 10. But I think maybe perhaps some improvements in the graphics and presentation and music would have pushed it to a 9.5 anyway. Maybe even getting close to a 10 out of 10. You can't get much better than this, believe you me. Maybe not everyone will agree with me. Maybe there are people out there that kind of a bit meh about Chuckie Egg, and I can perhaps understand that. But let me know your reasoning and thinking in the comments below. And there we go, guys. We have done it. We have completed 3 loops on Chuckie Egg. And there's the death jingle. And if you want to see me do more Chuckie Egg up to level 40 or 48, let me know. If I get enough response, I may attempt that. But anyway, guys, thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. 9 out of 10 from me. Goodbye.
So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please click a like below, leave a comment, and also subscribe if you haven't already. And over that way, there's another video for you to check out. Zypho, out.